Well, hello and welcome everyone to another episode of the Inner Frustum. This is a rather special one. We are joining up with three different locations from across the globe to have some very special guests today on the show. So here in Barcelona, I am at the ISE conference. We're on the Sony booth. Behind me is a beautiful Sony Verona, brand new LED panel built for virtual production. There's also a rather nice Honda bike as well that I would quite like to show off. And I'm joined here, pleasure to be with Stacia Pfeiffer, who, for those of you who don't know, Stacia is currently with Pixomondo and previously great experience in virtual production with McKenna and others. So Stacia, thank you for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
And also coming all the way from San Francisco, we have Noah Kadner, who's the virtual production editor for American Cinematographer. Noah, thank you. Great to have you here.
My pleasure.
And in London, or just outside London, at the Sony Digital Media Centre, which is in Pinewood Studios, we have Hanah Draper, our global head of production at Final Pixel, and Dr. Jodi Nelson-Tabor, who's the head of the Final Pixel Academy. So yeah, this is a rather unusual setup. I think we're all just kind of getting to grips with the reality of being on other sides of the planet for this podcast. But it's great to all be together, and I think the whole point of this Inner Frustum really is just to have a fairly casual conversation about virtual production and the sort of things which are going on right now in the industry. So I would like to just maybe start with a bit of a question, just put it out to everyone. Noah, how are you seeing things at the moment with virtual production? What's the latest development? What are you excited about? Or have you seen any great examples recently? Is there anything out there right now that you have been keeping an eye on, whether it's on the tech side, like LED panels, or more on the creative side? What are people talking about? What's interesting?
Yeah, no, there's all kinds of stuff going on. There's a lot of content coming out right now that was shot on LED panels. For example, this movie Poor Things, which is up for a bunch of Academy Awards in the US, has got a bunch of LED work, really unconventional stuff where they shot miniatures and kind of did some very kind of surreal sort of skies and things like that. And yeah, the tech is maturing a lot. We're seeing a lot of new panels. Companies like Sony are getting in on it and really kind of validating what we've been working on for years by bringing new products that are obviously designed to the highest levels. So, and also on another level, AI is coming into the mix as well. We're starting to see that being used for creation of backgrounds much more quickly because, as you know, one of the big challenges on virtual production stages is having content ready to go on the day you're ready to shoot. And AI helps a lot by giving you the possibility of generating that on the fly. So yeah, it's a very interesting time for sure.
How about you guys in London? Like Jodi, you do a lot of training. What's the noise on the ground with AI and training at the moment? I mean, are people asking for training in AI?
Yeah, I mean they're starting to. I mean they're still trying to be honest, wrap their heads around virtual production. But with AI sort of coming into the conversation as well, particularly on the art side, like you said, the concepting. We were at a training the other day and a conceptual artist was asking if he was going to be out of work, and what kinds of things does he need to start looking for in terms of skilling up, or does he need to get out and do something else? So I think, and then on the other side of that, there's lots of opportunities, as you said, for more independent filmmakers, more innovative kind of pieces of work that can happen that couldn't happen before where there was barriers. So I think from the education side, it's a very it's a good way to come into the industry because you get a lot of opportunity to innovate in that way.
And I think there's only going to be more options and opportunities for AI as we move forward. Like we've seen that Unreal has got plugins that now allow you to make efficiencies and texturing, and the more efficiencies that we can make on the things that take slightly longer, the more margin we'll make because it will be quicker to do. So I think that it's going to evolve more in the way that we can use AI, but as everything does in technology.
Mm-hmm.
How about using it in world building? Like, is anyone really doing that at the moment? Yeah, like using it for 3D generated content?
Excuse me. So Kubrick obviously have got their AI is taking us. It creates a still image and then like layers it up to create it in. I think they're now terming it 2.75D. We've grown 0.25. And so yeah, there's definitely stuff that is evolving in the landscape.
Outside of Kubrick, has anyone, you guys heard of any other 3D Gen AI being used in any projects yet?
Yeah. There's this technique called Gaussian splatting, which sounds really nasty to me, but is basically a way to sample an environment or a 3D object with just a bunch of. It's basically very analogous to photogrammetry, where you're using AI to look at a bunch of still images and kind of conjure it up into a 3D model. And I think that has a lot of promise. At the moment, the results are still a little bit inaccurate. Like if you look close up at these models, you can see the geometry is not quite perfect, and the textures are a little wobbly looking and things like that. But it's when you look at how much work is required to do 3D modeling now by hand, either by scanning physical models or by just manually doing all the geometry, the potential for AI to streamline that process and again kind of make the action of pre-production much more efficient and streamlined is definitely there. So I think it's with all these AIs. I mean, when I look at the output of a lot of AI models right now, I can spot it a mile away. So, to the point of are people's jobs at risk, I would only say in the most basic kind of, pitch book sort of early sketches that people might be doing on their own. But when you get to a certain point, it's like you just can't make the AI conjure up something consistently and at a high enough quality that most people wouldn't just recognize it right away and kind of be turned off by it. So it's kind of on its way. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I see in our team, our virtual art department, Worldbuilders, the Worldbuilders need to have an artistic vision, like a craft involved, and I think that's what the team did so well, is like bring that art to the 3D model build, the environment build, an eye for composition, an eye for lighting, an eye for how you put all these components together, and then make it look photoreal, make it look, as stylized as a director wants it or whatever. Having that human interface seems to be, for me, like what really makes it what it is in some ways at the moment. And yeah, maybe that will become more streamlined and things will change, but I kind of feel like we're always going to need that. And when we're doing environment builds, we also really have to iterate. We work so closely with directors and producers who need to feed in, whether it's from a client or a brand or from a production designer or a filmmaker. They have to feed in changes and little minute edits and this sort of thing that I feel at the moment still so hard to do with AI. Like, it's difficult to be iterative. Whereas all the tools we use with Unreal and everything make that so easy, for an artist to just have that little change and make those differences. But yeah, I definitely think that we'll see more of this in the next year or so. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, I think other topics of conversation for us anyway, like, so Sony, obviously, we're here at the booth with their brand new Verona panels. I don't know if you can quite see it through the camera, but the blacks are very impressive. Like, and this is kind of like proper virtual production geeking out of it. Like, so, wow, look how black it is. But it is definitely very cool, and it's the sort of thing that we do get excited about, because and it sounds like very, for a lot of people, quite minor, but it's a big deal, right? Because we find directors of photography are kind of often fighting with the wall and working instead of working with it a lot of the time, if that makes sense. Like they're often trying not to spill too much light on it, ideally, because we end up having it quite washed out. And as a result, their lighting may compromise a little bit what they're trying to achieve. And then lighting is everything though. So lighting is what really sells the whole illusion. And so like having these panels starts to improve that. Then what's also here, which is great, I didn't realise before we arrived, is they've got the mimics here, the Kinoflow mimics, and these Kinoflow mimics then also give you improvement in the light quality for skin tone. So they've got a RGBW, so you get that nicer skin tone. So the combination of these two products alone seems minor, but like in conjunction, should add production value. And it's really cool that we're seeing that thing happening now, I think.
I'm excited to see what's coming in the next few months. I think we're going to see a lot more of these panels out on the market soon.
Yeah, that'd be really good. I mean, so Hanah, how does that? Do you think that affects how you approach producing a shoot now? Like, are you going to think about it differently? Like, the more you hear about these technology advances, these things coming together, like, does that mean we're going to start recommending different types of integrations, different types of setups on shoots at a much earlier stage?
I think one of the things that we've been talking a lot about today is about the quantity of panels that you need to actually deliver something beautiful. Like if you've got a final pixel pitch and you can use a smaller amount of panels to deliver and what you need, I think that we'll see more of these micro VP. I loved your article, Noah, about the micro VP setups, and actually that's the world that we operate in quite a bit, because we can still achieve really great creative output without having to use a huge, great big volume. And I think that therefore, obviously with the higher pixel pitch comes a higher budgetary value. And so it's all about balancing up what the hardware is, what is needed for the actual project, for the creative, and then weighing that up. I think what we find is that because the technology is quite modular, we are able to put a nice hardware formula together that suits exactly what we're going to be shooting and what the project needs. So I think that every time the technology advances a bit, it gives us more opportunity to ensure that we're bespoking the solution to the project. I think that, in terms of stuff like with the coat, with your one, not with our one, we've got the crystal LED, which also looks beautiful. But with the Verona, it has the coating, it has the anti-glare, it has the ability to be used in different ways by our cinematographers. Like we were talking with two DOPs, Ben Saffer and Simon Rowling earlier, and they expressed their excitement about the fact that they're going to have less flags and hurdles to come up with when the technology starts to be created with virtual production in mind rather than with live events in mind. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
And are you hearing the same thing, Noah? Because obviously you work with American Cinematographer and you're talking to cinematographers a lot, I imagine. So are they generally excited about some of this stuff, or are people still kind of standoffish a bit from virtual production? Like what's the general vibe among the ASC or broader cinematographers these days?
Well, it's quite a spectrum, because you have the ASC is and most guilds have such a wide range of members, from people that are really trying to be on the cutting edge of whatever the latest technology is to kind of, more classically trained, lighting aficionado type of cinematographers. So definitely some of them are very into it. Others are just kind of waiting to see whether it matures if you've been in the business long enough, you know that a lot of technologies come and go. And so it's like, you don't want to necessarily hitch your wagon 100% to something that's still emerging. But I think virtual production will always have a place, because it offers so many advantages over more traditional ways of doing visual effects in front of camera. Anybody who's shot green screen versus a well-prepared and properly operating LED stage will tell you it's certainly a lot more creatively fulfilling to see everything happening right in front of the camera versus kind of, working with the foreground and kind of deferring the background deep into post. So yeah, I think there's some folks that are diving right in, some folks that are waiting and seeing, but to the point of these new panels that are coming out with better anti-reflective coating and with higher pixel densities, that's really the key, because again, these technologies were originally created for concerts, architectural installations, where the most important aspect was brightness, and things like reflectivity and sharp pixel density up close really weren't that important of considerations. So now that the manufacturers know that that's what filmmakers are looking for, we're starting to see more products coming down the line that do that. And I think you'll start to see more and more stages that are building themselves for the goals of less reflective panels and higher pixel densities, because the costs of building a giant screen that's not very dense and not very reflective, so that you can pull the camera back far enough and not end up seeing, the pattern of the screen on your shots, which is obviously very undesirable. You're going to start to see that happening. So hopefully that means you'll see more compact, economically feasible stages, and less instances where people build a giant stage and just simply aren't able to sustain it on a business level because it just costs way too much to operate it and even turn it on. Like I quoted a project a couple of weeks ago where somebody wanted to shoot on one of these stages, and they didn't even have enough money to run the generators for the day to keep everything on. Yeah. So it's just like, it's like when you realize that's the scale you're talking about, the possibilities for more compact, dense stages in the long run are pretty high.
Noah, you and I actually met a few years ago when I was an academic. You were doing a first piece on education and virtual production and had done an interview with me. I don't know if you remember that. I remember because it was very exciting for me to be a part of the article. And it's what's fascinating to me in being in the education space is seeing just the sheer trajectory and scale of that virtual production has taken off since that 2 or 3 years ago, where there was no case studies, nobody was really talking about it. It was really Mandalorian. Everybody was sort of poking to. And what I find really fascinating in the thing that Stacia mentioned as well is that production crews and production workflows are still being nuanced. Like nobody's got it figured out yet. And for education, because I quite often talk to a lot of educators, people in academia, universities, colleges who are trying to figure out how do we standardize virtual production training, because it's still moving all over the place. And my Danny Beller-Palucas had said, well, maybe it's not about standardizing the education, but building frameworks around these conversations, because every department essentially will have, as Hanah, you've said, has touch points across virtual production on a set. So for education, it's the same thing. Every department, whether traditional or the nuance at VP team, needs to be skilled up. So what are your thoughts on the education front in terms of, as the industry is moving at such pace, how does education keep up with that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, if I had to start a film school from scratch today, it would be a real challenge, because I see these technologies evolving, almost at a logarithmic pace now. I mean, especially with all this AI coming into the mix. I used to feel like I could envision where things would be in 5 years in the film business, but we're getting to a point where there are many possibilities. And so I feel like the best thing to teach people that are interested in this business is kind of the fundamentals, because the cinematographers that I talk to that are really leaning into virtual production techniques, or even doing stuff with AI, are very well trained in the most fundamental aspects of lighting, framing, cinematography, blocking, because those can be applied to any of these things. Whereas if you were to focus exclusively on operating a particular kind of technology, you could find yourself in a situation where you're very well trained to do something that's no longer in the business anymore. Mm-hmm. Like the last thing I would say is, you should train to learn how to operate video processors on LED walls. I mean, you could certainly train with that and you'd probably get jobs for another couple of years, but who knows whether that position is going to exist in 10 years. Mm-hmm. So I think it's important to offer people a kind of balanced education where they're learning really the kind of basic pillars of filmmaking to understand what makes a shot look realistic, what makes a shot look interesting, how editing flows a story along, and look at a lot of classic movies and then bring that into a virtual production stage and apply those lessons, so that as this business evolves and changes in probably more and more massive ways, they'll still be able to find their way and not feel like they were given an education that's kind of a dead end, because there's a lot of positions, like people who were trained, for example, in photochemical processing when we were shooting film, just a few decades ago. They either evolved their craft and became DITs, or they became colorists or whatever, or they retired because they simply did not have a skill that was transferable. So that's really the key thing, and I think most educators understand that it's not just about teaching people how to press a button. It's more like why to press a button. So,
Right.
yeah.
Well, a two-pronged question to that follow-up then is, because we quite often say the Unreal Engine or Unity, a games engine, is a really good tool for filmmakers to use, because quite often they've never even been exposed to that. And in virtual production, you now have people coming from the games, from the live event sector, from broadcasts, and traditional filmmaking, kind of all coming into the same space to make films. So we talk about these transferable skills, and Unreal Engine being a tool that they could use to help with their workflows, to help with previs and so forth. That bringing those convergence of technologies and interdisciplinary practice also into their training, other than just learning how to light or learn how to produce or to direct. What are your thoughts on that? So they come out with a general set of skills across the board.
Yeah, I mean, Unreal Engine has been kind of at the nexus of all the things that we're doing in virtual production by the virtue of the fact that it's able to render, feature quality imagery in real time. So learning that tool today is definitely useful, but it also, if you think about it, it's a bit of a fluke, because the only reason why it does that is because obviously if you're playing a video game, you want to have the highest quality visuals, and you can't sit there and wait for it to render a frame per hour or whatever, because that's a pretty boring game, like watching the paint track. You need it to be running at 24 frames, 60 frames, whatever. But I could certainly see a future where there are many tools, or perhaps all 3D tools, have the ability to run in real time. And so Unreal Engine itself might become less of the kind of bedrock of virtual production, just one of many tools. So again, I think it's great to be training people to use Unreal right now, but as long as that training is coupled with, kind of fundamentals on the side of, this is 3D modeling, this is lighting, this is composition, and now let's apply it to Unreal Engine. That way, that person, if we come to a future in which Unreal is but one of many real-time applications that are being used for this stuff, they don't feel kind of lost. They don't feel like, oh, I only trained how to use Unreal, but I don't really understand how to transfer those skills to this new tool that's now, the quote unquote standard. That would be, if that were part of the equation, I think that would be the most responsible way to train, young people or people who are looking to get into this business, or both, I guess.
And I think just from a very foundational perspective, set etiquette as well. I had to stop myself from saying set etiquette, but set etiquette. Now I can't say it at all. Set etiquette. Yes, etiquette. Because it's great that we're able to bring people from different pools and worlds and technologies and industries into the film industry. But with that, and which is amazing for the kind of creative ability of that, we have more unique experiences that are coming together to create film, but obviously there is an etiquette on a film set which I've noticed as a producer that is not necessarily always followed or adhered to because they don't know it. So I guess there is definitely an educational area there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, being a people person is a skill that can be taught. Learning how to kind of deal with people in the pressure cooker that is a live set, and people who are coming from a visual effects side. Not everybody is capable of that. If you're working visual effects, you may often be working completely on your own for the most part. Dealing with reviews where you're looking at your finished shots with the creative team, but you may spend the majority of your time kind of off on your own. And not having to answer a question right now, which is what you need to be able to do on a set. So yeah, I mean, that would be also a really nice piece of an educational package to offer students, is that it doesn't matter what we're working with, but being able to interact with people, to work under pressure, to be able to make the right decision at the moment and not kind of freeze up. Those are the kind of people that will, be able to find work over and over again. Because again, it's a word of mouth kind of industry, and it's obviously the quality of the work you deliver at the end of the day, but it's also, do people enjoy working with you? Are you able to integrate into a team? Are you able to function under pressure? All those things are the kinds of bedrock pieces of a long-term career versus somebody who's going to struggle and not be able to get work on a regular basis.
On the back of that, some of the other conversations that are happening around, of course, sustainability being a big benefit for virtual production, and that's being embedded in education as well, so that it's not an afterthought, or that it's not thought at the end of a production cycle, but rather going into, is also this idea about virtual production being a leveler for neurodivergent, more diversity, more inclusivity in terms of the storytelling, social mobility. So I wonder, like, what are some of the things that you're hearing maybe in that space as well? It's quite a big thing. There's lots of research being done over here, a big push to really to kind of reset the capabilities of production to make it more inclusive for a wider body of people.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting. When you look at some of the productions that are out there, they're able to tap into kind of a sort of global pool of talent, because a lot of the positions that are important on a virtual production set are not necessarily people that need to be there in person. Yeah, I've been on sets, in fact, I've done productions in our little stage here where I'm the only person in the room in front of the camera. The director is on a Zoom call, the production designer is on a Zoom call. Even the person who's operating the camera is able to go in through, remote collaboration kind of tools and do that work remotely. And they can be anywhere in the world. I mean, it's the only drawback I would say is if the shoot starts at 6 a.m. in the morning in one place and you're 12 hours ahead, you're kind of getting the short end of the stick, but you're still getting paid and it's still a gig, and you didn't have to fly a bunch of people into that place and burn up all that carbon when they could do the job just as effectively, if not even more so, remotely. I mean, what's nice about a remote production, if you've ever been on a set, there's a kind of it's kind of the more and more people that are there on the set, the more kind of chaotic and challenging. It's like herding cats, it's like if there's one, it's very easy. If there's 20, just getting everybody to be quiet for a moment to shoot a shot is a challenge. So all those things kind of work together. And yeah, I think the productions that lean into that and take advantage of that are going to be more inclusive and able to provide more opportunities. And, the ones that are more married to old ways of doing things. And I keep reading all these stories about the push of big corporations to get everybody to return to office. Like they don't want to have remote work, or they want to reduce hybrid work. And I think that's a shame, because insisting on people being in the same building together as if it's some sort of standard of work is crazy. I mean, it's rather, I think the best work you get out of somebody is when they're happy. And if they're happier doing it from their own desk at home versus, sitting in your nasty office with everybody else, you're probably going to start losing those people, because they're going to look for those opportunities where they can work from where they want to. So, all that works together.
100% is definitely, like, the culture element of it is so key, like maintaining an environment where people can be creative, whether that is, like, for some people that will be, they would prefer to be social around each other in an office, and for other people they would actually be more proactive and be more efficient at home. So I think it's definitely there's a balance that I think it's the responsibility of the employer to really acknowledge, be human about it. Think of people as humans rather than as names on payroll. I was going to say, like, from a personal note, like in terms of accessibility on set. So we did a shoot. Obviously we're shooting in virtual production. We're in a studio. It's more controlled. It means that we're not having to go up a mountain, for example, and shoot on a location there, or and like at the time I was suffering with some vision loss, and we were on set. I was producing it, and I was being very stubborn and just getting on with it because that's my vibe. But the like the studio's set up in a way where if there is a step down, then it's going to have been flagged on the floor by somebody that's assessing that risk assessment. If there is cables there, they're going to be taped down on the floor with some sort of nice probably pink neon tape on it. And it meant that the environment was actually really supportive of my vision loss at the time. And I think if we start thinking about the film set in a way that actually we can accommodate people's needs at the time of for whatever reason that is, whether it be that actually somebody on set has just had a baby, like and wants to, come in. Or my point is that I think we're in a position, we're in a juncture of film production where we can start thinking about how we can accommodate for people from different elements of and all walks and all needs, and be more accommodating and be more human about it, and hopefully that kind of positive change will come. And if this technology is what can achieve that, then I'm in. I am in.
Rather than their disabilities being a barrier to being able to participate in something that could be really game changing.
Yeah, and it's not just because it's the right thing to do. I think audiences today are becoming more and more sophisticated, and they're as interested in the story of the making of the movie as much as they are the final product. And so, if you can present a movie and say this was made using sustainable techniques, this was a very inclusive production, this had all these accommodations for differently challenged people, I think that's only a selling point for a lot of audiences today, and it's just a good thing, just a good thing on the karmic level as well. So I'm all for that.
And it's amazing what you can do with like a smaller kind of setup as well. Like we've played around, as I'm sure lots of people have, with having a very small amount of LED, and then having some tracking, having a camera, and being able to do kind of product VP. So like ultimately the can of whatever it is still looks like it's in a completely different country or on the beach or whatever, and you can still use those advantages of using the technology in that way, even in a tiny little setup.
Yeah, I would love to know from Noah and Stacia in particular, like how do you see things evolving on the set? Like we have VP supervisor, we have this new department that's kind of stepping in at the moment. And film is often with VFX, it's kind of linked to VFX, and advertising is sort of its own department a bit, it's a bit different. Like where is this going to go? Like, should camera start to take more of that department? Actually, is it a separate department? What are people, I don't know, I'm curious as to what you hear about these things, and also like the art department. Should actually the virtual art department just be straight in reporting to the production designer and not have a VP supervisor looking after it? Like, where is this all going to go?
There are so many different ways that can run, and as we've all seen, every company does that differently. I've worked with 4 different companies over the past few years on virtual production projects, and each one of them structures their on-set teams differently. Sometimes you've got even all in-house processes in terms of content creation. Sometimes you've got one vendor on stage with a handover from another company, and then another company again for post. So there's definitely a need to have a wider conversation within the industry in terms of streamlining protocols, streamlining processes, so that we can offer clients a better solution. Because ultimately we all lose if something goes wrong in any one of those handover points. If that slows things down on set, if that means that we have a lower quality final product in camera, that gives the directors, the DOPs, the producers a less exciting experience on set, and they're then less likely to go and use virtual production again. So in terms of how the virtual production supervisor can sit on set, it's definitely incredibly important that they're hand in glove with the DOP, but also that needs to extend to the production designer, the VFX supervisor. And I think, as we've all seen, these conversations just need to happen so much earlier on. Whereas, the VFX supervisor might not expect to be talking to other departments 3 months before you shoot. They need to be open to having those conversations and communicating.
It's true, that's sort of really true. What about you, Noah? Is this a topic of conversation when you're speaking with other people?
Yeah, the world of filmmaking is definitely a world of word of mouth, because people talk, crews kind of express their experiences kind of from one shoot to the next. And yeah, I've heard everything from virtual productions that run as like clockwork to ones that were just an absolute disaster. And it really does come down to things like preparation and having a team in place that has enough experience. But yeah, a lot of these technologies are so brand new that sometimes there's just not enough crew to go around that has that experience. And so, I think we're at that stage where you're kind of hearing both, like productions that had a great experience, productions that had a miserable experience, and it's a shame because those are the kinds of things that kind of make or break a tech in the long run. Whether it's seen as something that's more of a use or more of a nuisance. So, I am definitely doing everything I can to share the experiences that I have and kind of help people to kind of avoid those pitfalls and make sure that in the end they are getting the advantages out of this technology and not finding themselves in a conundrum. So yeah, it's I feel like the tech is at a point where it's very mature, it's very usable, and it just comes down to making sure that you have the right workflow and the right people in place to take advantage of it.
I think it also comes down to personal preference of who that HOD is. So like, for example, when we were talking to Ben Saffer earlier, as a DOP, he is really hands-on with Unreal and learning how to light in Unreal and learning how to read the metrics of lighting in Unreal. And I think that therefore that means that he will be more involved in the VAD environments, in the builds of the VAD environments themselves. He will have opinions on how they are lit, or even which sort of the creative scope of the environment. If he has an understanding that actually that will, if we build it in a certain way, then that's going to have a lighting list like this long when we actually come to shoot it for the real lighting. So what it means is that when we have that kind of personal preference and style of the DOP, we will therefore have to work and use our pipelines in a way that would be different to a DOP that wasn't so confident with Unreal, didn't really understand it. We would then have to be more considerate of that and communicate and translate a bit more. I think that's like the early days of what we're dealing with the evolution of the scape of virtual production. But I think that whilst we have people, we're going to have our nuances and our preferences, and I'm unsure where it's going to go. So that's cool, huh?
Personally, I'm really excited about seeing productions that have run with the art department kind of leading. If you have your production designer actually leading the virtual production processes, I think you see a lot more communication and integration between what's going on in the foreground and what's going on on the screen, because you can have a lot of mismatch of color and material that unless the art director and the production designer are across that from the beginning, that's going to get lost in translation. So there definitely needs to be more involvement.
It's exciting though, because that means we're barely scratched the surface of this. I think, because I think I agree that those conversations are still at a very early stage on set. But once we see more production designers really grasp that and then really grasp those departments, then we're going to really see how this evolves, I think. So it's pretty cool. So our time's come to an end. It's been great to have you on the show, Stacia. Thank you, Noah, for dialing in all the way from San Francisco. And to Hanah and Jodi in London, again, thank you. Great to see you again, and look forward to the next one. Cheerio.